Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to do my first Scotch ale beer review that I've done for you in Sweden. So this one is quite an interesting one. I've never seen it anywhere else other than Systembolaget since I've been here in Sweden. But this guy is a collaboration between Brewdog and Birra del Borgo, and it's brewed in Borgorose at Birra del Borgo's place in Italy. It's called ReAle in a Kilt, and it's a Scotch ale, like I said. Comes in at 8.4%. So it should be quite an interesting one. Some of these Brewdog collaboration beers that I've reviewed for you fairly recently have all been really interesting, so hopefully this one kind of keeps up that trend. But anyway, as is usual with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the breweries. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. As usual, all of the relevant links are in the video description for you below. The brewery websites, the links to my other reviews from both of these guys, and also my Facebook profile for the channel and my Untappd profile as well. So feel free to connect with me in whatever way you wish. It's always good hearing from you guys. But anyway, to tell you about Birra del Borgo first. So, this brewery was founded by Leonardo Di Vincenzo, who was actually an academic researcher in biochemistry before he moved into brewing. But he developed an interest in home brewing, and he travelled around Belgium, Germany and England to learn about the various different beer styles that were in the world. So upon his return to Italy, he actually began to upscale his brewing, and in 2005 Leonardo officially launched Birra del Borgo in Borgorose, which is a small village in Rieti province at the border between Lazio and Abruzzo, quite close to Rome in fact. But their first production site is the old brewery, which is called Il Vecchio Birrificio in Collerosso, which was where they created some of their most famous recipes, such as the ReAle, which was the one that preceded this, and also the Duchessa Ducale. And in 2007 they actually launched their pizzeria place in Rome called Birra del Food, which is in Travestari in Rome. And the idea of this was to create a pairing between beer and pizza, and to really encourage people to embrace Italian food and Italian beer. And it's worked out quite well apparently. But 2009 saw them inaugurate their new brewery with a larger production line, and they converted the old brewery into a beer lab for their experimental brews. And this is perhaps where this one was developed in fact. But they also launched Open Baladin Beer House in Rome with Teo Musa of Baladin Brewery, which is this is a big beer hub in the city of Rome actually, so I need to go and check it out when I actually finally make it to Rome to visit. But later in 2011 they also partnered up with Sam Calione of Dogfish Head in Delaware to open up the Birreria in Manhattan, which apparently is another very good beer venue. So that's another place I need to check out when I go over to the States. But anyway, that's Birra del Borgo. To tell you a little bit about Brewdog, as I've told you many times on my channel, this was my local brewery when I was back in Aberdeen, and they were started back in 2007 by James Watt and Martin Dickey, and their first brewery was in the Keswick Industrial Estate in Fraserburgh in the very northeast of Scotland. But more recently they've moved their main brewing operations to their new purpose-built facility in Ellon in Aberdeenshire, which is a little bit closer to the city of Aberdeen. But these guys are known for being influenced by the American craft brewing renaissance, and they say themselves that stone brewing were their biggest influence when they started up. But they're known, as I say, for being hugely experimental, and they've held the title of World's Strongest Beer on 3 separate occasions. But they opened up their first brew pub, which was Aberdeen, in 2009, and since then it's really taken off. But what is really cool about this brewery is that you can actually invest in the brewery through the Equity for Punk scheme and buy into them, and in exchange for that you get a lifetime discount in the brewery shop. So if you buy shares in Brewdog, you get access to special beers and things like that, something I need to do actually, but you get access to these special beers, and you get discounts in the brew pubs and also in the shop online as well. So definitely worth doing, and something that I really need to do myself. But these guys are actually the largest independently owned craft brewery in Scotland these days, which is pretty cool when you consider the humble beginnings that they started from. And they've got brew pubs all over the place, all throughout the UK, and they've got ones in Tokyo, in Brazil, in Finland, Sweden and Norway, Italy as well, and I think they've got one in Barcelona now in Spain. So always expanding, so do keep an eye on the brewery website and you will see what is going on there. But anyway, that's enough of the histories of the brewery. As I say, go and check out the brewery websites if you want to read up a little bit more on them. But we'll get stuck into this guy now. So this one is brewed in Borgorose in Italy, as you might be able to tell by the style of the bottle here. This is a Birra del Borgo bottle that this guy's in, and as I said, 8.4% Scotch ale, brewed in Borgorose in Italy. And I think this is actually quite a new one I've never seen this before, but it might have been brewed for once or twice. I really don't know about that, so hopefully some of you guys can tell me. And I couldn't find an article on this beer when I googled it actually, which was a bit disappointing. But they may have done it when Birra del Borgo first started being sold in Brewdog bars, so maybe it's been brewed and this is the second batch. But I got this in my local Systembolaget here in Lund in Skåne in Sweden, but very nicely presented. ReAle, of course, is one of the flagship beers of Birra del Borgo, and this one is called ReAle in a kilt. And you can see the tartan and the Brewdog dogs in the label there. You can see the Birra del Borgo castle, and I think that's maybe just to symbolise the town of Borgorose, but very nicely presented. Typical Birra del Borgo cap on it there. But yeah, so without further ado, let's get stuck into this guy. 8.4% Scotch ale from Borgorose in Italy, near Rome. And as you can see, a nice smoky opening on this one as we get it out. I read that this one was supposed to have a really nice and quite interesting smoky infusion to it, so quite interesting. See that one. One of my friends told me to try this beer because they tried it when we arrived in Sweden, so very much looking forward to having a go at this guy for you here. But as you can see, it's poured a really nice kind of dark orangey colour. So I'll just bring the light over and let you see exactly what colour it is. It's a nice dark kind of orangey, coppery gold colour, I would say. It's got a huge head on it, as you can see, just short of 3 fingers, maybe 2.5 fingers, but looks very nice. There's some big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass there, but quite a few small ones going up towards the bottom of the head. No sedimentation visible in it actually, and if I put my fingers behind it, you can see that it is hazy. It's not see-through at all, this, but looks a very, very nice beer. So let's have a look at the aroma for this guy. Quite an interesting one. You can definitely pick up a kind of meaty or smoky aroma from this one, which is quite unusual for a Scotch ale. So maybe this is going to be a very interesting collaboration beer indeed. But yeah, you can really pick that up in the background. It's more of a kind of peaty, slightly acidy smoke that you can get out of this. Not acidic in the same sense as you get from the likes of sour beers and things, but there's definitely a peaty and smoky note to this. It's quite cool. As I say, I couldn't find out what malts and things they've actually used in this beer, because it would be really interesting to know. All I can tell you is that it's brewed in Italy and it comes in at 8.4%. But it's a huge malty nose on the beer. As I was saying, the underlying component of this beer really is the smoke and slightly meaty characteristics. It's a little bit toasted, no doubt about that. Some toasty kind of bready character in there as well. Dark caramel, definitely coming out. Maybe treacle actually is a good way to describe it. And some woody or nutty notes and a definite bready presence too. But as I was saying, that underlying note of smoky and meaty character is coming out there. That's the most prominent component in the aroma there. So they've probably gone for a very Scotch ale, I would say. You can smell a little bit of the booziness coming out it too, and at 8.4%, that is something to be expected. If you sugar it up a little bit more, you can get just a little bit of a kind of fruity note. So maybe a kind of red, figgy, fruity ester coming off of this one. So quite interesting actually, really quite interesting beer, this one. So without further ado, let's get stuck into it. So this is the ReAle in a kilt, which is brewed by Birra del Borgo in Borgorose, Italy, and it's a collaboration beer with Brewdog, my local brewery from Aberdeen in Scotland. Slàinte. Now that's really quite interesting, quite unusual. Yeah, there's a definite smoky and meaty presence in this beer. It is actually quite peaty more than anything. It's got a bit of that slightly ashier character that you expect of peat in whiskey, which is quite interesting. But as you would expect from a Scotch ale, it is very malt forward actually. So there's an as I was saying, there's a nice bit of spicy character just on top of this as well, but in the middle of the palate you get a nice, slightly brown bready carpet just across the middle of your tongue. It just blankets the very middle of your palate, and on top of that you're getting some kind of woody and nutty flavours in the middle. There's a bit of caramel sweetness in there, but as you move out towards the edges of the tongue a bit more, you're getting some of these smoky and peaty characteristics in there, and it is a good bit of kind of it's almost a little bit of a kind of charcoaly bitterness you're getting from this one. Really burnt, really kind of toasted characteristic, and you'll feel that just at the very back of your palate, just in a little bit from the edges. It's really interesting, this, and please let me know where you've come across this beer before, because this is the very first time I've tried it, so I'd be interested to know where you guys are tasting this from in the world, but very interesting. But yeah, as you go through the beer, that kind of charcoaly smokiness becomes a little bit sweeter and more meaty, if that makes sense. It kind of, the bitterness of it just tones down a little bit. But this is a really interesting beer. Definitely give it a go if you do see it. But yeah, there's a good bready characteristic to this beer. Like I say, it blankets the middle of the tongue. In the middle of the palate, there's a bit of caramel sweetness, but there's a good woody and nutty flavour infused in there, and a bit of kind of cereally spice, which is what you sometimes expect from the Scotch ales. The traditional Scotch ales that we get brewed in Scotland always have this nice big bready malt base there, and a lot of the American ones, I find, forget about that component of the flavour, but this one actually finds it quite well, and it adds this really interesting, dark, smoky bitterness to it, which is really quite interesting. In the back corners of the palate, there's a light earthy hop character in there, and that builds a good bridge between these dry, smoky characteristics at the back of the palate as well. You just feel that in the very back corners, and as you move around the edges of the palate there, you can pick up just a nice, slightly smooth, grassy and earthy mix of hop flavours in there. Really quite nicely done and nicely fused together, the flavour in this beer. Yeah. Behind the very front of the tongue, which is usually where you get some of the oily character of the beer, you always get this little oily bubble. That's where you're getting some of the fruit flavours coming out in this one. So with this, I would say it's a nice kind of slightly plummy and slightly figgy red fruit ester you're getting out of this beer. But I want to say as well that there is a bit of a kind of orangey citrus coming out. So definitely an interesting blend of flavours going on there, but the orange works really quite well with that meaty sweetness in this beer, which is quite interesting. The meaty sweetness is just a little sort of subtle feature of the flavour. It's more the most prominent component of the malt base, I would say, is that burnt smoky character, but the orange actually works quite interesting with the meaty component of the beer and gives you a good transition over the palate. So there's a lot of stuff going on in this beer. It's quite hard to just simply try this beer in a few minutes and describe it for you, but there is a lot going on. Just let your palate adjust to this beer before you try it and have a good go at it. It's really interesting. One of the most interesting ones I've done in a while, actually. Yeah, I'll stick with that. There is a nice red fruity ester to this beer. Figs, maybe a little bit of plums and raisins in there too. Some of the sharper fruity esters, but there is a definite orangey citrus flavour in this one too. And just pay attention to that. Behind the very front curve of your tongue, little oily bubble, and it becomes quite juicy. So in terms of the mouthfeel, this one, I would definitely say mid-bodied. Carbonation on it is quite smooth. There is a good bit of oily character to this beer as well, and it's got a nice malty sweetness, but at the same time, a little bit of the cereal element to this beer and some of the smoky characteristics give the malt base a bit of dryness actually, which is quite interesting. You've got the earthy hop character and a bit of the grassiness around the edge of the palate there, but that's actually quite smooth, not too dry and not too bitter. The dryness and bitter character really is coming from the malt base in this beer, which is quite interesting, and that smoky element to the beer is quite unusual in a Scotch ale, at least in my experience. The only other one I've had like that I can think of is the peated Cask 7, which was from the Loch Ness brewery in Scotland, but it was a very interesting beer that you just had to let your mouth adjust to, and this one it's almost like a kind of a toned down version of that when it comes to the smoky characteristics. So very, very interesting beer and very nicely done, different from any Scotch ale that I've ever come across anyway, so I really would recommend that you give it a go. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this beer review. As always, let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Always interesting to hear from you guys, and please let me know where you've actually seen this beer before. This was the very first time I came came across it before. This was in Lund in Sweden. I've never seen it before, so let me know if you've tried this beer before and where you are. Always interesting to hear that. But until my next beer review, I hope you've enjoyed this one. Please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Feel free to add me as a friend on Untappd or connect with me through the channel Facebook page. Always good to hear from you guys. But until my next beer review, it's Slange for now, and I will revisit Birra del Borgo and Brewdog in the fairly near future. Skål!